Okay, good afternoon. This session doesn't really require a chair or anything because it's a homage to a person whom some of you knew and others probably know by name, because I've seen in some of the papers that you reference to his work. The Aiken family, I hope if there are no problems, is listening to us in the USA. Hello, Aiken family. Aiken is actually not the right pronunciation. Is Naz here? She could tell us how is it supposed to be? Akin. But Ömer lived in the US for many, many years, and I think the whole family is now used to Akin. So I beg the pardon of the Turkish language that I will use Akin because it's easier. Ömer sadly passed away sometime before this conference. When we deliberated regarding the theme and so on, he still managed he sent us an abstract. He sent us an abstract for this conference, and 6 weeks later, he passed away, which is really sad. And Ömer is one of the founders of design thinking in general, and the series of Design Thinking Research, DTRS in particular. And he was the organizer of DTRS 3, which was held in his native Turkey, in Istanbul, many years back. So we saw it just appropriate to remember him today, because if he weren't ill, an illness that caused his death, he would have been here with us, which unfortunately didn't happen. He was, as his family told us, he was very proud of being a member of this community, and we were proud that he was a member of this community because his contributions are endless. He was an architect, got his degree from METU, where Naz also comes from, Middle Eastern Technical University in Ankara. But then he went to the US to get a PhD at Carnegie Mellon University, and he somehow stayed there until his last day, as by that time a professor emeritus. And Ömer was an admired teacher, an admired colleague, and he wrote a large number of papers and some books. This one that you see here, Psychology of Architectural Design, which came out in 1987, so that's quite some time ago. Some of you weren't even born then, I think, some of the younger people here. Was a very influential book. He was probably the first person to use protocol analysis, the method of protocol analysis, which has become very prominent in design thinking research. He was the first person to use it in architecture. One of his PhD supervisors, Chuck Eastman, was the first one to use it in the general area of design, but Ömer really elaborated much further and did very detailed studies in architecture. I can, from personal experience, tell you that if I had access to protocol analysis, it was thanks to him and his work. Some papers that he published before this book that I read, and this is how I found out about protocol analysis in design. He also did some professional work as an architect, and I think one of the probably most acclaimed pieces was at the University of Pittsburgh, which is also the place where he worked, not at this university, but in the same city, in Pittsburgh. But at the University of Pittsburgh, they have a Turkish nationality room, which has become a regional landmark because of his excellent design. So besides being a researcher, he was a talented architect. He also drew very beautiful sketches, which unfortunately I don't have an example of. Here are two quotes from two people about Ömer after he passed away. Peter Lloyd, who was here until a few minutes ago, he had to leave for the airport, but when he learned about Ömer's passing, he wrote, "Such a sad thought that he is gone. He really brought expertise and energy to design thinking research, and a fun guy to be around with." Nigel Cross, I don't need to introduce Nigel Cross to this community here, said, "That's very sad. I didn't know that Ömer had died, although I had heard, perhaps from him, a few years ago, that he had serious health problems," which we are all very sorry for. So for the rest of this session, what we're going to do is I'm going to just read to you, and you can follow on the screen, what he has written to us by way of abstract that he would have probably developed into a paper to be presented in this symposium. It's also on the screen, but I hope I'll do justice to it by reading it. Of course, no commentary on my behalf. What is design research? Some questions. 1, what roles do different participants in the design process have? 2, can there be design without designers? Relates to our previous session in this conference. 3, how do multidisciplinary teams perform in design tasks compared to designers-only teams? This is something that has been taken up in this conference. 4, what are possible productive ways of involving non-designers in the design process? 5, are there multiple definitions of design? And he gives some answers, not necessarily directly aimed at any one particular of these questions. So some answers. 1, designer as researcher. 2, research as design. So both ways. 3, designer and researcher collaboration. 4, researchers as designers. And 5, research as design. And now the text itself. Can someone design something easier so that I can put on my glasses without them getting tangled in with all the other things that I carry on my neck? The Cartesian approach to design rationality describes the potential connection between design and scientific research, as well as applied research in engineering. The sciences are engaged in their quest with a sense of ingenuity. לא. כן, יש את הטקסט הזה שאני מקריאה. Okay, I'll just continue reading. Yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't move it. Yeah. Okay. The sciences are engaged in their quest with a sense of ingenuity and courage, bordering on audacity. They assume that the truths, plural, underlying nature can be discovered. All of the difficulties of this challenge have not deterred scientists from pursuing this quest. If anything, both the energy and the results of scientific research have intensified. The one characteristic of this search, which remains unblemished by the intellectual skirmishes of the past, is the absolute rigor that must be applied to testing assumptions and hypotheses before they're admitted into the company of accepted theories. In examining the field of architectural design and its practices, we find approaches which are both sympathetic and in opposition to this position. First of all, architecture is an interdisciplinary field of practice which includes the results of many disciplines of the natural sciences. In two of two determining, I'm just reading it as it's written, in 2 of 2, determining the integrity of architectural structures, for instance, the law of gravitation and its effect on the equilibrium of building materials brings into consideration theorems from the area of building physics. In determining the thermal comfort of occupants in buildings, practices based on laws of thermodynamics are indispensable. Furthermore, there are areas of application in architecture, particularly in decision-making during design, construction, and operation of buildings, which employ concepts and methods of the information sciences. This includes techniques of operations research from mathematics, graphics, and the field of computer science, and systems analysis from the field of management sciences. In pursuing these ends, the field of architecture displays some similarities to the natural sciences. First, the principal pursuit of architects is that of creating new designs. These designs, in addition to responding to the behaviors of physical contexts and occupants, also have to respond through stylistic expression to the psychological needs of both occupants and designers. These stylistic choices become fashionable for architects' practice in cycles, very much like the paradigm shifts that have been described by Thomas Kuhn. Second, architects are motivated to find tools that are as robust as those in the natural sciences for accurate explanation and prediction of behavior of buildings, whether these are manifested in occupants or natural materials and elements. Finally, architects are direct users of the sophisticated tools and technologies developed for the sciences in order to reach these ends. All of these factors indicate an original, if not a mutually beneficial relationship between architecture and natural sciences. At the same time, there are forces that push the natural sciences and architecture apart. First, the fundamental posture of architects in practicing their trade is one of advocacy as opposed to the skepticism of the scientist. When the architect proposes a correct solution to a given problem, at best, she's looking for a good enough solution. You see that he also was a feminist. Consequently, the motivation is to defend this position and persuade others to accept its merits. Before reaching this point of advocacy, the architect of record has to consider alternative solutions as well as weaknesses of these alternatives. But the fundamental posture still remains as one of advocating a solution. The architectural designer is fundamentally skeptical of any solution until there is an absolute assurance that all degrees of skepticism are completely eradicated. A similar distinction exists in 3 of 2, the object of the architect's search as opposed to that of the scientist. I think he refers here to the preliminary questions and answers that he had listed at the beginning. The scientist is ultimately interested in knowing what is, while the architect is interested in what ought to be. So this concludes the abstract that Ömer had sent us. The material about his CV we obtained from the Aiken family, and we are very grateful to them for sending it to us. We got in touch with them after we contacted the dean of the School of Architecture at Carnegie Mellon, who referred us to them. And I would like to invite people in the audience who knew Ömer if they would like to add a few sentences. Maybe Andy, would you like to say something about Ömer? Maybe without a mask, if possible?
Well, no, I was just trying to make... So, given the amount of time, I'm just thinking that I am like Lena and Anastasia in terms of age when I think I first met Professor Akin. So I was just trying to relate this back to history to give you a sense of timing. And I do remember at the time, one of the big questions was, for someone who was in engineering school, whether the kind of research we were doing was even considered legitimate engineering research. You know, is this the type of question, and are these the kinds of methodologies that one should admit into engineering and count these questions as among the kind of questions that one would want to be asking in an engineering school? Because the notion of design was considered within engineering as something already solved. We certainly know how to design. We know because airplanes are already flying. So what else is there for you to be doing, Andy, in researching engineering design? And I remember getting advice from lots of people, Professor Aiken being one of them, simply to be, number one, there are never questions that are ever fully answered. And even when you think that they are fully answered, there are always new ways for you to rethink that question to answer it in a new way. So you took the question of is the question done and reframed it by taking a design approach to the very question of the research itself, which I thought was a very beautiful way of thinking about it. So I think that hopefully that kind of advice will continue to resonate for everybody who continues to study this question. The questions will never be fully done, and even if someone tells you that it's done, feel free to reframe the question and keep going.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think this is a very accurate reflection on the way Akin was also a mentor to many people, and he liked young people, and he was more than willing to share his opinions with young people, which is really great. And Naz, would you like to please add something?
Thank you very much. I did not personally know Professor Akin, but I'm here to forward a message from people who did. My mother and father, they're also retired from Middle East Technical University, same department. My mother was 8 years senior to Ömer, and she was his research assistant in the undergraduate studio courses that he took. It's a small world. It is a very small world because later on they became neighbors in the same apartment block for a short period of time, though. When he was visiting 10 years ago, I think it was, he was invited back to the faculty to give, as an invited professor for one semester. But my mother, my father, they were very upset. They had heard from other parts, from other places, through friends, his passing away. And she wants to say, we extend our condolences to the family, our regards and our love. She remembers him as a very articulate, very meticulous, very kind person, beautiful projects he had carried out, beautiful drawing, beautiful draftsmanship. And the last time they were together, they were in a jury in an undergraduate studio for the fourth year students at METU 10 years ago, or when he visited around that time. She remembers he was very kind-hearted, very light and kind to the students, making jokes, making that stressful moment for the students during which they are being evaluated easy to go through. So she's sending her regards to the family. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And to the Akin
Ömer
Akin
So,
family.
if I forgot to mention their names to the family,
Yeah.
Gönül and Argun Evyapan.
So is this recorded, Ezri, for the people? Great. So this will actually be a little bit of a surprise for the family. I don't know if the children, who I think were born all and raised in the United States, I don't know if they know your parents, probably not, but what a nice thing to hear about their father. So thank you very much all for listening to this, and we'll conclude this session and go to the next one. Thank you. So,